edge, running on the water, coming to the 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 edge, running on the water.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מרים השם, עושה שמיים וארץ.
Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat Torah study. I am from Melech Rahmiel ben Yaakov, and we have a very interesting and exciting study ahead for you guys. So glad you're joining us. So things have been quiet, pretty quiet here in Israel lately. There haven't been any missiles going off. The war, or whatever it was, with Iran is paused, at least for now. And so life goes back to more normal things, such as daily life and so on and so forth. I continue to have lots of conversations with people in the community here in the Golan Heights, where I live, in the north of Israel, about Karaitism, and there definitely is an interest. We're having our regular meetings, our World Alliance of Qara'im meetings here in the city where I live, in the Golan Heights. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of interest. Some people are appalled by it, but I think even the people who seem to be appalled by it are fascinated by it, and they realize that what is being said, when I describe some of the issues regarding Karaism, they realize that what is being said, that there is a lot of truth to it. And yesterday I was at a Shabbat meal, and a friend of mine was there, and it was hosted by another family. And this friend of mine was kind of saying, well, I'm not really into Karaism. I know what Melech is saying is true, but I've been doing this rabbinical Judaism thing for a long time. I know it's a whole bunch of baloney, but I do it, this is the way I've been used to doing it. I'm part of a community that does it this way, et cetera, et cetera. And then the host said, you know what, you're more of a Karaite than Melech is. You're sitting here saying it's a bunch of baloney and you just do it because, that's what you've been doing for years, but it's a whole bunch of BS, but you do it anyway. Anyway, we all kind of got a good laugh out of that. But it really does expose or allow us to see something very amazing, which is more and more people are waking up to the idea that the concept of returning to the true Torah, returning to the true Tanach, is that the time is now. More and more people are thinking with open minds and are ready to cast off whatever misconceptions they had, whatever brainwashing they'd undergone, and really give this idea of returning to true Torah a look. Doesn't mean they're going to officially become Karaites, because there's a lot at stake. They have families, they have traditions, they have community, all this kind of stuff. It's not that easy to do. And in fact, when someone says, I want to become a Karaite, I actually encourage them not to. I say, you're better off just not. You can listen to what I have to say, but if you decide to make the full jump and outwardly become a Karaite, then you're gonna face a lot of ostracization, a lot of questions, a lot of attacks on you, and so on and so forth. So don't do it. And I literally mean it when I say that, because I know that if someone really wants to do it, they're going to do it anyway. It's kind of like when, in the story of Ruth, when Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, is returning to Israel with Ruth and Orpah, her two daughters-in-law, after Naomi's sons have died in Moab, and Naomi says to them, I have nothing for you. I'm paraphrasing, of course. I have nothing for you in Israel. I can't give you any more sons. Even if I could, you'd have to wait for them to grow up. Don't follow me. Go back. And then both of them say, no, we're gonna, we want to come with you. We want to go where you go. And then Naomi insists, says, no, my daughters, I have absolutely nothing for you. Please go back. And then it says that Orpah kissed Naomi and departed, went back to Moab. But Ruth clung to Naomi and said, wherever you go, I go. Wherever you lay your head down to rest, I shall lay my head down to rest. Your people are my people. My God, your God is my God. In other words, Naomi just knew that there was some calling. I'm sorry, not Naomi. Ruth just knew that there was some calling in her heart, that despite whatever hardships there might be, despite whatever unknown challenges that would be ahead, that there was something in her heart and her soul which told her she just had to do this. And that's what I feel about charism. I discourage people from doing it because there is a lot at stake. There's a lot of, again, you're separating yourself from the community. You're standing out. You're saying things that are not accepted, by the mainstream. And, but if someone really has it in their heart to do it, they're going to do it no matter what, just as Ruth did. And I actually say it not as a kind of a tactic or a technique to kind of trick them into becoming a Karaite, but I really mean it, because I think it's enough at this point for everyone to do what they can, to everyone do each according to his ability and his will. And if someone doesn't feel like they're ready to outwardly make that move and outwardly declare themselves, a Torah-only, a Tanach-only Jew, a Karaite, whatever you want to call it, then it's better they don't do it. You really have to be ready. You really have to have thick skin, and you have to be ready for the long haul and a difficult path if that's what you do. And even those who don't do it, even if they're exposed to it and start getting exposed to these ideas, then already that's something. It's something they've never heard before. So we're having a long discussion yesterday at the Shabbat table about tefillin, and is there any basis for it in the Tanakh, which of course is not. Tefillin is phylacteries. It's those black boxes that the rabbinical Jews tie to their bodies in the morning prayer service. And of course, there's not. There's no basis for it whatsoever in the Tanakh. It didn't come about until the mid-Second Temple period, probably about the 2nd or 3rd century BCE. And but when I started describing this or started stating my reasons, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. When I started stating my reasons or my proofs that this did not exist in ancient, meaning when I say ancient First Temple period Israel, then I said to a certain person who was at the table, I said it's like the Matrix, right? When remember the movie The Matrix, when Neo was exposed to the truth, he couldn't handle it, and he actually when he found out the truth, he started throwing up. He couldn't handle the truth, and at a certain point, I realized that for some people, if I continue telling them the truth, it's the kind of truth that once you see it, you can't unsee it. But some people can handle it, and some people can't. And you have to be ready to be able to handle this level of truth when you've been brainwashed, when the nation has been brainwashed for so many thousands of years. And people will see it as, I heard one person last night at the Shabbat table say to me, what you're telling me is that I should not follow the way of my fathers, but I learned this from my father, who learned it from his father, and so on and so forth. How can you reject all of the rabbis, all the great wise men of the rabbis, the Hachamim, how can you reject, the way of your fathers? So there's a lot of emotional baggage there, right? You feel like you're almost rejecting your family. You feel like you're almost rejecting your parents or grandparents, even though it says in the Torah, in the end of Leviticus, that in the end of days you will admit the sins when you're in your exile. You will admit the sins of your fathers, and you will come back to Yahweh. Right? So we're not supposed to follow the ways of our fathers. We're supposed to reject the ways of our fathers, but people see that, they love their parents, obviously, and their grandparents and their great grandparents and who they are and their heritage and their traditions. And they find it a bit difficult to, to over this idea, or to wrap their heads around the idea that they've been lied to, but it's not their father's fault or their grandfather's fault, or maybe it is to a certain degree, but it's really just a bunch of lies that have been passed down from generation to generations, and it's hard for them to kind of wrap their heads around that. So what's the line from the movie The Matrix? We after a certain age, he says, I think, we have a policy that after a certain age, we don't free people from the Matrix, or something like that, right? So the same thing, you're really freeing people from the Matrix when you give them some information, and they can get very defensive. They can get almost belligerent, even potentially violent. I kid you not, when you show them the truth, and they can't all handle it. You can't handle the truth. So I'm a bit careful, because I don't want to freak people out. But when people come to me and start asking me questions, then I will tell them. And I'll sometimes say to them, do you want me to really go at it? Or do you want me to give you like the kind of gentle, watered down version a little bit, right? So I kind of try to judge where they're at, because I want to get the information across, but I don't want to get it across so harshly and so strongly that it's going to cause a kind of a natural defense mechanism to raise walls and then reject it. I remember many years ago when I lived in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim, when I first got into Karaism about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, I was so gung-ho into it that I would just beat everyone over the head with it. And it caused a lot of problems. I have a very funny story that many years ago, I went to Shabbat at some dear friends of mine, the Sunshines. They've unfortunately since departed this world. But and I was constantly, they were rabbinical Jews, very open. I mean, the wife, especially Nikki, was very open, and the husband not so much. I was very close with both of them, and I kept on just beating them over the head and telling all the guests I was so gung ho about charism. And at a certain point, they said to me, "Listen, we love having you at our Shabbat table, Melech, but you cannot try to convert everyone to charism when you come to our Shabbat table, or else we're not going to be able to have you back as much as we love having you. So please promise you won't do it." So I promised them I wouldn't do it, and then I was invited. I remember it was to Sukkot, to a Feast of Tabernacles meal at their house, and I don't know how it happened, but there were about maybe 10 people at the Shabbat table, and about 8 of them were Karaites. Unbeknownst to my hosts, about 8 of them were Karaites. I even remember, some of you may remember, Michal Hippie Lily. She was at the table. Nobody knew she was, she wasn't vocal about being a Karaite. And there was another person, and anyway, there were a whole bunch of people who were actually basically Karaites at the table, and my hosts had no idea. I'm not sure exactly what the relevance of the story is, but I just thought it was funny that that people really are getting back, or really are discovering the lies of rabbinical Judaism and getting back towards true Torah, even though there is a lot of resistance. Because if you look at it, if you go back about 300 years ago, basically every Jew was a rabbinical Jew. They were an Orthodox Jew. Maybe they weren't, didn't keep everything, but they lived essentially an Orthodox Jewish lifestyle. In the, let me just switch the, hold on a second, let me just switch the network here. There we go. 1 second, please. That should do it. Okay, I think we're gonna have better reception this way. So yeah, I mean, 300 years ago, most Jews were Orthodox Jews, and now about in Israel, somewhere between 10 and 20% of Jews are Orthodox, are in the Orthodox rubric, and even there are a couple of different, denominations, one could call it, of Orthodox Jews. I won't get into all the details right now. And worldwide, in all of Jewry worldwide, maybe 10%, if not less, are actually Orthodox Jews. So to go from close to 100% to around 10% worldwide shows already that in the past couple of hundred years that people have rejected Orthodox rabbinical Judaism, whether the rabbis like it or not. That's the trend. And there is a minority that still cling to it, but that minority is becoming smaller and smaller, despite the efforts of those in the Orthodox world to try to increase it. At any rate, so it is looking very good for Karaism. The nation is very open to it. The nation has rejected rabbinical Judaism and is coming back to true Torah more and more every single day. So that's where we are. Okay, we're going to dig in, and welcome again, everybody, to the study. And let me share the screen. What happened? Did I close a window off? Oh, I see. Got it. 1 second. Close this out. Cool. Okay, so we're going to talk about, I've wanted to do this for a number of weeks now. So I remember many years ago when I used to go with my ex-wife to a place called Ramat Rachel, a kibbutz on the outskirts of Jerusalem. And these particular archaeological finds were on display. These are called the Melech seals. So let's learn a little bit about them, and we'll go through Rabbi Wikipedia, the only rabbi I really trust. And we can read through a little bit, and then I'll fill in with some of my own information. So let me share the screen. There we go. So we're looking at the LMLK. I know this is not Martin Luther King. Seals, this is the Melech, like my own first name, Melech. Melech means king, by the way. I did not give myself the name. That was the name I was given at my circumcision when I was 8 days old. I'm named after my great-grandmother Malka, which is a very common Hebrew/Yiddish name. And that's how I got my first name. At any rate, so the Melech seal, LMLK. So it appears on the handles of several large storage jars from the Kingdom of Judea. And later on, we're going to find out it's dated to a certain king who we've spoken about a bunch of times, and Hezekiah mentions it right here. First issued during the reign of Hezekiah around 700 BCE. Hezekiah was probably most famous for being under siege in Jerusalem when the Assyrian king Sennacherib, I don't know how you pronounce him in English, Sennacherib, maybe, Sennacherib. At any rate, Sennacherib attacked Jerusalem, and then was suddenly, according to the Tanach, his army was miraculously defeated. We spoke about the I forgot the exact name of the seals, but the archaeological find, but we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago. The Syrian pyramids, I think it was called, or cylinders, where there's actually a description of Sennacherib besieging Jerusalem, and it mentions that he had caged up King Hezekiah like a bird in a cage, but it does not mention that Jerusalem was ever conquered. I have to now, for my own verification, find out the name. Remember the name of that. What is the archaeological find that talks about Hezekiah caged like bird? Let's get the help of our good old friend Wikipedia. I'm sorry, Sennacherib's prism. That's it. I remembered pyramid, but Sennacherib's prism. So we spoke about it a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and just to remind everyone, so the Assyrian king Sennacherib records his 701 BC campaign against Judea. He boasts of destroying 46 of Hezekiah's fortified cities and trapping Hezekiah in Jerusalem, stating, "As for Hezekiah the Judahite, who had not submitted to Mayoka, shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city, like a bird in a cage." Okay, so we spoke about that a couple of weeks ago. And maybe we could talk about some of these other finds that are related to what we're going to see here. But let's learn a bit more about the Melech seals. So they bear 4 Paleo-Hebrew letters. What's Paleo-Hebrew? Paleo-Hebrew is the old Hebrew script. We won't get into the details right now. As well as a symbol resembling a winged sun. And you can see it right here. Let's open this up. So that is Melech. In fact, here this is a L, M. This is LMLC. Okay, so this is a Melech. Okay, that's what it looked like. And here, see here the winged sun. Okay. Several complete jars were found in situ. In situ just means in the place where they originally were. At the ancient city of Lachish. The ruins of Lachish can be visited to this day. In fact, I was on my way there about a year and a half ago. I was on my way to visit Lachish. It's down south. It's southwest of Jerusalem. And on the way there, the road was shut down by the police. There had been a terrorist attack where 2 Israeli policemen had been killed by Arabs. So I was never able to make it there, but I will one of these days. At any rate, so they were buried under a destruction layer caused by Sennacherib. So what's a destruction layer? In archaeology, destruction layer is exactly as it sounds, right? A city or a place gets destroyed, and there is a layer in the archaeological record of smashed, often burnt, charred archaeological remains, and that's called the destruction layer. It represents a layer in the consecutive archaeological record which shows that the place had been destroyed. And Lachish indeed was destroyed by Sennacherib. In fact, I believe it's mentioned, if I remember correctly, in this Sennacherib's prism. The Lachish reliefs depict the Assyrian siege of Lachish, a city mentioned in the Bible before the attack on Jerusalem, and so on and so forth. That's all having to do with Hezekiah. But let's focus on what we want to focus on here. So Sennacherib reigned over the Neo-Assyrian Empire from 705 BC to 681 BCE. It was in 701 BCE that the Northern Kingdom was destroyed by the Assyrians. By Tiglath-Pileser III. It's mentioned in 2 Kings chapter 17. We're not going to go into it right now. So none of the original stamp seals have been found. So the actual seals, some 2,000 impressions made by at least 21 seal types have been published. So in other words, they didn't find the seals that made the impressions, but they did find the impressions. This is an impression, but it was made from an original seal that's pressed into the wet clay. Okay, so what's the significance of all this? So the text, Lamed Mem LMLK, is vocalized in the Hebrew language as Lamelech, and here this is what it would look like in the ancient Hebrew text. That's what we saw on this thing. You can see it right there. The Melech. And it can be translated as belonging to the king. In some cases, we'll see the name afterwards. And the L at the beginning, in Hebrew, we read from left to right. So this is the L, M-L-K. So genitive means possessive, dative means to. So of or for, right? So of the king, for the king, to the king. And the other three letters are Melech, king. Okay. Number of jars say LeMelech Zif, LeMelech Hebron, LeMelech Socho. These are all places. And these jars were all managed in a single site in the Shvela. The Shvela is it's essentially the what we'd have to look at the geography of Israel, but basically to the west on the Mediterranean Sea, you have the lowlands, the coastal plains. As you get more into the center of the country, you have, maybe it is worth looking at. This is some interesting stuff, actually. Let's do a Google Maps, and you can see it for yourself. Oops. Let's zoom out. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Because it's very interesting, the geography of Israel. Fascinating. Well, I mean, I guess any geography is fascinating, but imagery, we want to show, is this a satellite? Layers. I think we want satellite. Terrain. I guess it kind of explains it. Traffic, biking, more. Satellite better. I think terrain is better. It's going to show the elevations. Okay, so if we look, okay, so we look at Jerusalem, we could see the it's up in the hills, right? Jerusalem is hilly. It's approximately, if I'm not mistaken, about 1,000 meters, about 3,000 feet. I might be off a little bit, maybe a little bit less, above sea level. And you can see that it's hilly, right? It's mountainous almost. Not as mountainous as in the north, where I live, but somewhat mountainous. And then if we go to the west, then we have the lowlands. We have the coastal plain. And in the middle between the lowlands and the central mountains or hills, we have something called the Shvela. The Shvela is essentially the foothills. It's the place where you rise, where the terrain rises from the lowlands, the coastal lowlands, to the elevations that are in the center of the city, right? And we can see that these mountains, they essentially follow up the spine or the central spine of the country. So for instance, right around here, you can see these mountains here, okay? It goes down like this. So past on the east side of on the west side of the Kinneret, you can see it's mountainous here. So you're gonna have cities like Tzfat, and you're gonna have Mount Meron. These are all pretty mountainous areas. And then here in the Golan Heights, where I live, it's also going to be this is a plateau, but it rises to the mountains in the north, to Mount Hermon, which is right around here, and then that extends into the mountains of Lebanon. To make a long story short, and maybe I should point out one other geographical feature, which is interesting. So if you see, so here's some hills, not right on the coast, but near the coast. And here's the more interior mountains. So here's Tiberias, here's Sfat, which is very high up in the mountains, okay? And then you have right around here, See if I can find it. If I'm not mistaken, it's right here. So you see a valley that kind of cuts across from here to here. There's no mountains, and that's called the Jezreel Valley, which is mentioned a number of times in Tanakh. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much, but the Shvela is kind of this area, the foothills of the Central Mountains. Okay, so let's get back to what we were talking about. Right, or can you even see the Shvela, or the Judean foothills, is a transitional region of soft-sloping rolling hills in south-central Israel, stretching over 6 to 9 miles between the Judean mountains and the coastal plain, so on and so forth. Okay. Okay. So these Melech to the king jars were sent to each one of the 4 administrative regions, as indicated by the name of the localities on the jars: Tzif, Hebron, Soko, and nobody knows what this fourth one is. And they were found all over the place, mostly in the southern kingdom, Judah, and a couple in the north, where I live. Over 2,000 have been found, and you could see where a list of the places that have been found: Kirbet Kayafa, which is mentioned often. If you ever listen to biblical archaeological lectures, you'll hear a lot about Kirbet Kayafa, and so on. This is Lachish. This is a city that was attacked right before Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, attacked Jerusalem. He attacked Lachish. And Ramat Rachel, I mentioned Ramat Rachel. That's where I used to see them, or I saw. There were a couple that they had in a display case there, but there were a bunch of them found in Ramat Rachel. If you're ever in Jerusalem, then Ramat Rachel is a great place to go. It's on the outskirts of Jerusalem. It's a very beautiful kibbutz, a beautiful view there, looking down towards the east, and yeah, it's really a nice place, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's learn a little bit about what the significance of these Melech seals were. So beginning with the Editio Princeps, the first edition by Charles Warren. Charles Warren was a famous archaeologist. He also excavated something called the Warren Shaft, which is related perhaps to the conquest of Jerusalem by Yoav ben Tzruya, the head of David's army. At any rate, a diverse assortment of theories have been promulgated to explain their function. So what are these seals for? Again, here's our seal, an example of one. Okay, it's a seal with a winged sun that says "for the king." So what were these? And it was stamped on clay jars. So what were they for? So since the landmark excavations of Lachish, we just mentioned Lachish, again, that was one of the administrative cities of Judea during the time of Hezekiah. And the last city that is mentioned that was conquered by Sennacherib, the king of the Assyrians at the time, before he attempted to conquer Jerusalem. So establish the date of the seals to the reign of Hezekiah, that's the king who we just mentioned. The number of feasible explanations is narrowed down to these, all associated with Hezekiah. Okay, so military rations collected as an emergency during a short period, several months to a few years at most, preceding the Assyrian invasion by Sennacherib. Sennacherib is who we just spoke about. Government taxes. So remember, these are all in jars. These are all in large clay jars. They're stamped on these large clay jars. Government taxes collected through the majority of Hezekiah's reign as a long-term economic buildup until the Assyrian invasion by Sennacherib, or religious tithes collected through Hezekiah's 29-year reign in response to his worship reformation following his accession. And so he was one of the good kings who got rid of the idols, got rid of the high places. In support of the first two theories are the inscriptions, which can be read as the names of 4 places. In support of the third theory are the geographic statistics, which do not associate any of the 4 words to a particular place or region other than the entire southern kingdom of Judah. And we don't need to get into all the details there. So, depending on which of the above theories are preferred, several other aspects of the operation need interpretation. The people who performed the stamping were either government officials working directly for Hezekiah or Levites and or priests associated with Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. The icons symbolize either royal stature or religious nature. And again, we're talking about this winged sun. The superinscription LMLK denotes the Judean government or a specific divine being, considering its application to Israel, Yahweh. So I don't agree with that. But at any rate, the subinscriptions, Hebron, MMST, Soko, and Zilp, record either 4 places or 4 votive statements. Again, my interpretation is that it's 4 places. Okay. Engraving styles indicate at least 2, possibly 5 people made the seals. The 21 types can be grouped together in 5 or 6 sets, but they may have been created or utilized in pairs based on quantities of their impression. That's going a bit too details. Into detail, researchers frequently use lowercase x when referring to a series such as X4C instead of using an upper. This is all, again, we don't need to know all of that. And so on and so forth. So let's see if we can get additional impressions. Several hundred seal impressions made of the same type of jar handle have been found in the same context as the LMLK. So these are other ones. Over 50 types have been documented. Most of them have 2-line inscriptions divided by 2 somewhat parallel lines. Okay, so here's a LMLK jar of Hebron. Let's see if we can blow it up. Let's see where it says actually LMLK. I think we're just seeing the jar there. Maybe the next one we can see it. So that looks like the winged, oops, that's too big. Too big, let's go back. That again looks like the winged sun, and I think over here is right over there, I think is the Melech. And so on and so forth. Okay. And it goes a bit more into details. And I don't think we need to go into those details. Okay, so those are the Melech seals. Again, let's summarize here. What's the significance? So they're from the reign of Hezekiah. Hezekiah is associated with is the king who defended the attack on Judah, on the southern kingdom, by the Assyrian king Sancheriv. Not long after the exile of the northern kingdom by the Assyrians, the destruction of the northern kingdom by the Assyrians. So we're talking about the southern kingdom here. So there have been some approximately 2,000 impressions found with these LMLK stamps upon them, or these LMLK seals upon them. Okay. The Melech, once again, means to the king or for the king. And we have examples, LMLK Zif, LMLK Hebron, LMLK Soko, which could have been places. Okay. They were all manufactured in one single site. Possibly Lachish, we spoke about Lachish, under the authority of the king. Alluded to in 1 Chronicles 4:23. We'll actually take a look at that. And from there, once they were manufactured in that one site, they were sent to these 4 administrative regions, Zif, Hebron, Soko, and MMST, whatever it is. They've been found all over the southern kingdom. And in fact, here's a map of where they've been found. Let's blow that up. So we see a bit in the north. Okay. As we go down south, we see all of the places they've been found. Here's Jerusalem. Bring it down. Bring it out a little bit. Here's Jerusalem. And right next to Jerusalem is Ramat Rachel. That's the place I mentioned where I first saw them many years ago. Okay. 163 were found at Ramat Rachel. 281 found in Jerusalem. 415 in Lachish, Tel Lachish. And let me just close the window here. Tel Lachish, and so on and so forth. Okay. So they were either military rations collected by Hezekiah leading up to the invasion by Sennacherib. They were government taxes getting ready, a long-term preparation for this Syrian invasion, or they were tithes. Okay. So that's the basic idea. Let's see if we can look a little bit more at these. A bit hard to see, but there you can see the winged sun. Again, the winged sun. And here you can kind of make out Melech, and so on and so forth. Let's see if we can talk just a little bit about the significance of the winged sun, because it is important. Open this in a new tab. Okay, so the winged sun. So we don't care about ancient Egypt. It's interesting and it's perhaps related, but so the winged sun. The main article is the LMLK seals from around the 8th century BC. The winged solar disk appears on Hebrew seals connected to the royal house of the kingdom of Judah. Many of these seals and jar handles are from Hezekiah's reign, together with the inscription Melech belonging to the king. Typically, Hezekiah's royal seals feature 2 downward pointing wings and 6 rays emanating from the central sun disk. And some are flanked, so 2 downward pointing rings, 6 rays emanating. Some are flanked on either side with the Egyptian key of life symbol, which looks like that. Prior to this, there are examples from the seals of servants of King Ahaz and King Uzziah. Compare also to Malachi 4:2, which referred to the winged son of righteousness. We actually did learn Malachi 4. We actually finished learning Malachi before we got into Zechariah. And so on and so forth. So this is the actual seal of Hezekiah. This is not the LMLK seals. But we can see here also the winged disk of the sun. Right? Here's the sun. Here's the sun in the middle. Here is the wings. And we won't get into the whole meaning of it right now, but I just did want to show you that this is a common symbol that appears not just on the LMLK impressions, but in other places as well. Okay. Alrighty. So that's it. We could go into a lot more detail, but I don't want to do that. You can look at it on your own. Are there any questions or any comments? What I want to do in these little sessions is kind of give you an introduction to some important biblical archaeological finds, and I encourage you all to go out on your own and watch. There are a lot of great channels out there. If you just type in biblical archaeology, you'll find a lot of different channels. And it's important to know. It really gives us a lot of context. Okay? So we're going to take a break for a minute or two. Then we're going to dig into the book of Zechariah. If you want to prepare for the next part of the study, we are starting up in chapter 9. Say exactly which verse. Chapter 9, verse 14. That's where we left off last time. We're going to take a break for about 5 minutes and put on music. And we will be back and we'll dig into the book of Zechariah, the book of Zechariah. Okay, so see you all back here in just a couple of minutes. And let's do it.
Ramavino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Cuando el rey Nimrod al campo salía, vino en el cielo y en la estrellería, viendo lo santa en la judería, que había de nacer Abraham había. Abraham había, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham había, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. La mujer de tierra no nada, día en día ella preguntaba, que tiene la cara tan demonada, ella ya sabía el bien que tenía. Abraham amigo, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham amigo, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Al fin de los 9 meses París quería, iba caminando por campos en viñas, y a su marido no le descubría, topó una mara y parería. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel.
Okay, so we're back. And let me just, oops. Okay, so once again, welcome back. Let me just set this up. This goes like that, and that goes like so. So we're going to be digging into the book of Zechariah, chapter 9. We're up to verse 14. By way of review, we'll just read a little bit as we've been doing in English. We'll read from the beginning of chapter 9, and then when we get up to 14, we will switch over to the Hebrew. Okay, let's do that. Let's dig right in. Let me share the screen. And you should be able to see this. So I'm going to start reading in English. So the word of Yahweh is against the land of Hadrach, which is near Damascus, and will come to rest on Damascus. Damascus is, of course, in current-day Syria, but it's one of the oldest settled cities in all of history. The eyes of all the people and all the tribes of Israel are on Yahweh, and on Hamat too, which borders on it, and on Tyre and Sidon. We spoke about those Phoenician cities last week. There are three major Phoenician cities. We'll bring up the map again. Let's try to do that. History, Google Maps, Google Maps, Google Maps. Give it a second to populate. Okay, so we go to the northern border, the current northern border of Israel. It's right here. We see that about maybe 10 miles north of the border, and you can go right up to this border. You can literally go right here. This called Rosh Nikra. There's beautiful caves there if you ever come to Israel. And by the way, I should announce, maybe this is a good time to announce that with a colleague of mine, we are starting a touring company in Israel. We're going to be doing exclusive custom-made tours. So if you or your family or friends want to come see Israel, then we're going to be running these tours, and it's going to be very custom oriented, but the emphasis is going to be on the Tanakh. So we're going to go to places, we're going to take out the Tanakh, and we're going to actually take a look at these places that are mentioned in the Tanakh. We're going to get the context of them. We're going to have lots of great food, lots of great scenery, So if you're interested, you can let me know privately, and more details about that. This is, anyone who knows me know this is my passion, the land of Israel, Torah, Tanakh. So I decided it was time to open up with a colleague of mine, with a friend of mine here in the Golan Heights, such a company, to be able to allow other people to experience the beauty and the incredible history and the biblical history of Israel. Okay, anyway, talk about that another time. But getting back to this, so here's one of the main cities of the Phoenicians at the time. This is Tyre. And then there's Sidon. And then we go up a little bit further. Find it. Where is it? That's already getting up into Syria. Let me see if I can find it now. In fact, there it is. And this third one is Byblos. So let's just keep an eye on that one. Right, so it's a little bit north of Beirut. Again, here is Tyre, Sidon, is Beirut, and there is Byblos, called Gival in the Tanakh. And these were the three major northern Phoenician cities, northern Phoenician coastal cities. Tyre was the center of where they produced what's called Tyrian purple. Whole big story about that. We won't get into right now. But one of the interesting things about Tyre and about the Phoenicians in general is they established colonies all over the Mediterranean and even beyond. And one of the main colonies they established was, I'll zoom out a little bit, was in modern day Tunisia, right near Tunis. Let's see if we can find it. Here's Tunis. Again, I'll zoom out. Okay, so Tyre is going to be right around there. This is modern day Tunis, the capital of Tunisia. And if we zoom in, we'll see right a little bit to the west of Tunis is, let's see if we can find it. Zoom in a little bit more. Oh, where is it? Yes, come on. I have to remember, I was there in 2018. Anyway, right around here somewhere. Let's see where did it go. It doesn't matter. Right around there is the city of Carthage that you might have heard of. It was eventually destroyed by the Romans in what's called the Punic Wars. But I visited the place in 2018, and it was a colony, a Phoenician colony, of Tyre. The Tyrians established Carthage. Anyway, I digress, as I tend to do sometimes. We are back in Zechariah chapter 9. So Tyre and Sidon are mentioned here, those Phoenician cities in modern-day Lebanon. Though they have great wisdom, and Tyre built herself a fortress and piled up silver like dust and finest gold like sand in the streets. In other words, it was a very wealthy city. And in fact, this is historically accurate. They produced something called Tyrian purple. You can take a look at it. And in fact, the word Phoenician, this was a Phoenician city. The Phoenician is a Greek word meaning the purple people. So that's Tyrian purple. This is Tyrian purple. There's a whole lot to say about it. It would we talk about it for hours if we got into it, so I'm not going to get into it right now. But if you ever get a chance to visit Tunisia and Tunis, I highly recommend. It's a very interesting place and safe, very safe. Okay, so where were we? Oh, I was doing a different translation. Okay. But Yahweh will take away her possessions and destroy her power on the sea, and she will be consumed by fire. Ashkelon. So now we go down to the southern Philistine cities. There are 5 Philistine cities. We mentioned this last week. Let me just check in and see if there are any comments or questions in the meantime. There are 5 Philistine cities. Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gaza, or pronounced correctly, Aza or Raza. You'll even hear the Arabs pronounce it as Raza. Starts with an ayin. Gat and Ekron, and they're down south of modern day Tel Aviv on the coast. Okay, so here we have Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron. So this is prophecy against the cities that are north, the Phoenician cities that are north of the modern border of Israel, Tyre and Sidon, and these are the prophecy against the southern cities, the Philistine cities. Gaza will lose her king, and Ashkelon will be deserted. The Mongol people will occupy Ashdod. So 4 of the 5 cities are mentioned here, 4 of the 5 Philistine cities: Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gaza, Ekron. The only one that's missing is Gat. Gat is where Goliath was from. You may have heard of Goliath. So Mongol people will occupy Ashdod. It says their mamzer will occupy Ashdod and put an end to the pride of the Philistines. So in other words, the Philistine cities are going to hear about all the destruction of the Phoenician cities. These were not Philistine cities. Philistine cities were down south. The Phoenician cities were up north. In general, at least in the time of David and Solomon, David and Solomon had very good relationships with these Phoenician cities. That same cannot be said with the Philistine cities, right? David and Goliath. A Mongol people, or the Mamzer, will occupy Ashdod, and I will put an end to the pride of the Philistines. I'll take the blood from their mouths and forbidden food between their teeth, implying that they ate blood of animals, and forbidden food, meaning they ate what we would call unkosher food. Those who are left will belong to our God and become a clan in Judah. And Ekron will be like the Jebusites. But I will encamp at my temple to guard against marauding forces. Never again will an oppressor overrun my people, for I am keeping watch. Okay, I think we're going to pick it up here. No, we read this last week, so I don't want to go back. We'll just keep on the English, and then once we get to 14. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey. We spoke about last week how the New Testament on a colt, the foal of a donkey, picks up on this and has Jesus entering Jerusalem on a donkey. And we spoke about how the New Testament deliberately tries to essentially kidnap or repurpose prophecies from the Tanakh in order to falsely make it seem that Jesus / Yeshua is a fulfillment or fulfills prophecies mentioned in the Old Testament. We gave the example of artificially having the birth of Jesus / Yeshua moved from Nazareth to Bethlehem, because it speaks about how the future king over Israel will come from Bethlehem. I highly doubt he was in Bethlehem for his birth. I believe that's a made-up story, completely made up. But the writers of the New Testament, they wanted to kind of, as I said last week, fit a round peg into a square hole. They wanted to retroactively, they wanted to retrofit Jesus' life into the prophecies of the Old Testament. So they made up stories or distorted stories of what actually happened in his life. And I do believe he was a real person, but just greatly distorted and exaggerated. And so this is an example, right, of how the New Testament kind of tries to retroactively, jam Jesus' life to fit the prophecies of the Tanakh. Anyway, I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea. Right, so now we see why they wanted to make a story about Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, because this is clearly a future prophecy. Is it an end of days prophecy? Not necessarily clear. It's a bit confusing in Zechariah whether these prophecies are end of days, meaning in the future, or they are prophecies for the beginning of the Second Temple period. Of course, the Davidic line was not reestablished in the Second Temple period. It was a province of Jerusalem and the surrounding area. Judea became a province of the Persians. Then the Greeks, Alexander the Great, conquered it from the Persians in 332 BCE. Then it became essentially Hellenist until the Romans took it over in 63 BCE, thanks to the intervention of the Pharisees. And that lasted until, I forgot the exact year, but hundreds of years, including during the destruction of the temple in 70 CE. At any rate, his rule will extend from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. Speaking about the future king over Israel. As for you, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will free your prisoners from the waterless pit. Return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope. Just let my cat in. Come, sweetie boy. Joshua, come right here. Come, baby. Come. 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 What's the matter, sweetie? Come in, you stay. Lovey, come in, you stay. Come, baby. Come. You want to go back out? Go, sweetie boy. Go. Yeah, I had a horrible incident. I don't even want to talk about it. This week, where a street cat had been run over, and I tried to save its life, and it was very disturbing. At any rate, I don't want to get into it right now, but I keep a special eye on my cats more than I ever did, because I don't want ever to happen to them what I saw happen to the street cat. It was just very horrible. Okay, return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope. Even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you. I'll bend Judah as I bend my bow, and fill it with Ephraim. So this is Judah is the southern kingdom, Ephraim is the northern kingdom. So it's kind of a prophecy of the two coming back together. We see lots of prophecies like this in the end of days prophecies. I will rouse your soul Zion against your sons Greece, and make you like a warrior's sword. Okay, so that brings us to verse 14. And now we're going to switch over to the Hebrew. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom, Tsuri. If I didn't say self-taught philosopher, I think I know who that is. I do. The Y is the giveaway. Banas Dok. Ben Sadok. And everybody else. Welcome to the study. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type it into the comments. I should also mention at this time that we've started doing a podcast. If you go to either the World Alliance of Qara'im YouTube channel or the Karaite Insights YouTube channel, there should be a playlist called Podcasts. So the last podcast was a very interesting podcast with Israel Horowitz, a Karaite leaning or Torah only or Tanach-only Jew who's actually is an ordained Orthodox rabbi who left Orthodox Judaism, and he's getting a lot of traction on YouTube. Maybe I'll post a link. In fact, let me do that. If I can find it. I can't find it. Just go to the either the World Alliance of Qara'im YouTube channel or the Karaite Insights YouTube channel, and you'll see it there under the podcasts tab or the podcast playlist. Alrighty, so now we're going to switch over to the Hebrew. We're in verse 14. Let's do something a little bit different because the language in Zechariah is now getting a bit more poetic and complicated. Let's just read very briefly through the English. We only have 3 verses, and then we can hopefully get into into chapter 10. But let's just read through the English so we can kind of get a preview of what we're going to see in the Hebrew. So then Yahweh will appear over them. His arrow flashed like a lightning. Sovereign Lord will sound the trumpet. He will march in the storms of the south, and Yahweh Almighty will shield them. They will destroy and overcome with sling stones. They will drink and roar as with wine. They will be full like a bowl used for sprinkling the corners of the altar. Yahweh their God will save his people on that day as a shepherd saves his flock. They will sparkle in his land like jewels of a crown. How attractive and beautiful they will be. Grain will make the young men thrive, and new wine the young woman. Okay, so we have, again, to get the context, we have the king coming to essentially lead Jerusalem. Right? Proclaim peace to the nation. So that's kind of a messianic end of days kind of prophecy. And Judah and Ephraim will be reunited. Judah representing the southern kingdom, Ephraim representing the northern kingdom, which it was severed or was broken into 2 after the death of Solomon. King Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, in the south, Yerovam in the north. Okay. And as Judah and Ephraim go to war against its enemies, here specifically against Greece. Then Yahweh is going to appear, and he's going to save his people on that day, as a shepherd saves a flock. Okay, let's dig into the Hebrew, and we'll bring up our usual cast of characters, or Robert Alter, etc. And again, I don't want you to think that Robert Alter is the be all and end all commentaries, but he's very good, and I find him very accessible, and that's why I use him. All right, so we're looking in the what's going on here? I'm a bit confused. 1 second here. There we go. It's very strange. This was happening the other day as well. And I don't know why. Try one more time. They must be having a problem on their site. See if we can access it a different way. Strange. I think they're having a problem on their site. All right, we'll have to go verse by verse, which is fine. And let me just try one more time. Let's see what's going on. No, I guess they're having some kind of problem on their site. Hopefully they'll work it out, but we'll go in the meantime verse by verse, which I don't like to do. I like to get the whole thing in context, but okay, that's what we're gonna have to do. Okay, so we're in verse 14. Okay. So this is Zechariah chapter 9, verse 14. With Yahweh alehem yira'eh, Vitzah kebarak chitzo. So Yahweh will appear over them. Vitzah kebarak chitzo, and his arrow will go out like lightning. Wa Adonai Yahweh, wa shofar yidka'ah, and my Lord Yahweh will blast upon the shofar, on the ram's horn. And he will go in the storms of the south. Okay, what the heck does that mean? Let's see if I can try to bring up the whole chapter one more time, although I don't think so. They're having a problem on the site. Hopefully they'll fix it one of these days soon. Yeah, I don't know why. It was happening the other day as well. Very strange. Let's try this one here. Different text. Nope. Yeah, all of the Hebrew seems to be, their Hebrew full chapters seem to be out of commission. I'm not sure why. Okay. Okay. Anyway, we'll just go verse by verse. All right, let's see if we can get a little commentary on that one. So that's verse 14. Okay. Blast of the ram's horn. This is called to battle. Fair enough. All right. We look in the English. Okay, so this is 14. All right, verse 15. Let's see if this works. Should, again, I don't know, the whole it's not coming up, but whatever. So in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 15, Yahweh Tzivaot, Yagin Alehem, so Lord of hosts. It's a horrible translation. I like to translate this as, sometimes I'll translate it, I think Robert Alter translates it as Lord of armies, but I like to translate it as Yahweh surrounded by his entourage. His, entourage, I think, is the perfect translation. Yagin Alehem will defend them, will protect them, shield them. Talking about Israel, of course, as Israel goes out to battle. And they will consume and conquer using slingshots. That was one of the fighting instruments in ancient Israel. I'll make this a little bit bigger. We know that David spoke about the city of Gat. So David killed Goliath with a slingshot, with a shot from a slingshot to Goliath's head. Ushatu hamu como yain, and they will drink and be noisy like wine, or like those drunk on wine. So in other words, what this verse is saying is that Yahweh is going to help Israel attack its enemies, and the enemies are going to be like drunkards, like people drunk on wine. All right. They'll destroy and overcome with slingshots. They will drink and roar as with wine. Let's get a little interpretation of that. So Robert Alter says the Masoretic text says drink and roar, hamu, like wine, but the Septuagint reads dam, which is more plausible. Septuagint is the Greek translation from the 3rd century BCE of the Tanakh. Drinking blood like wine. Is the topos of ancient Hebrew marital poetry. Okay. ומלאו כמזרק כזוויות מזבח. And they shall fill, like the mizrak, and mizrak are like basins, bowls, places where things are thrown, where blood is collected, because zaviot mizbech, like the edges of the altar. Remember the blood, when we were learning early in Leviticus chapters, in the early chapters of Leviticus, we know that the blood of the sacrifices is always sprinkled or poured around the sides of the altar. Okay, and so this is what we're referring to. So, in other words, they're going to, with slingshots. So he's saying damo, I guess. Shatu damo como yain, I see. And they're going to drink, if we go with Robert Alter's understanding that this is a mistake, it should be damo. And they will drink their blood like wine, which makes sense. And they will fill their basins like at the sides of the altar, talking about the enemy. So just as the sides of the altar is where the blood of the sacrifices are gathered, so this is imagery of Israel drinking, literally drinking the blood of its enemies, and the blood of the enemies dripping out into the bowls. Right? And let's even get a Robert Alter translation on that, just to see what he's thinking. Again, he's not the be all and end all, but I think he makes a lot of sense a lot of times. Okay, and Yahweh shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall come out like lightning, and the master of the Lord shall blast the ram's horn and go forth in the storms of the south. The Lord of the army shall defend them, talking about Israel, and the slingshot and the slingstone shall consume and conquer and drink blood like wine, and be filled like ritual basins, like the corners of an altar. Okay. Now we're going to verse 16. So Yahweh on that day will save them, will provide salvation for them. Okay. Yomahu, on that day, it's on amo, like the flock of his people, or the implication there is his people will be like his flock. Same of the day is the flock of his people. Okay. Avnei nezer mitnosesot al admato. Like Avnei nezer means the jewels on a crown, right? The crown jewels. Mitnosesot, that are al admato, that are lifted up like a banner upon his land. So that's very poetic. Let's try to get a translation and interpretation. Okay. So Robert Alter translates it as, the Lord shall rescue them on that day, his people like sheep, for they are crown jewels that gleam on his soil. I already see where he's going with that. Let's get interpretation. Though syntactic placement is a little odd, the clear sense that God will rescue Israel as a shepherd rescues his sheep. And I'm not sure why he translates this as gleam. I have an idea. But mitnoses, here they also translate as sparkling. I like toses. Okay, fair enough. It's sparkling on his ground. Okay, on the ground. Fair enough. Again, very poetic. And I just want to check something for myself. So really, this verb mitnoses comes from the underlying root nun, n-s, or nun sameth, which means a banner or a flag. Okay. So we go here. Right, a banner, standard ensign signal. So let's look at the BDB. It's a little bit smaller. Right, nasas, to be higher, conspicuous. According to some denominator form from nes, that it may be displayed. So I'm not sure where they're getting. We now strike out. Right, mitnotzet, mitnotzot. So the reason, I don't want to get into all the details, but it's possible it's being translated as sparkling because it's the mitnososot is being related to mitnotzotzot, which means to mitnotzets, means to sparkle. Anyway, this is getting too much into the weeds. We'll just go with Robert Alter's translation. For their crown jewels that gleam on a soil. Okay, so we're going to 9:17. Okay. Kimatovu matuvo uma yafio dagan bahurim, because how good and how beautiful dagan bahurim v'tirosh inovev bitulot. Dagan bahurim. So we have here bahurim means like young men. Okay, literally chosen men, but it means the choice men, right? Which is a reference to young men, and it's in parallel. Okay, it's in oppositional parallel or antonymical parallel with bitulot. Bitulot means young women or virgins, literally. So here we have the young men and the young virgin women. So we can get an idea of what's going on in this verse by picking it apart. Here we have this little, remember, if I said many times, whenever you see this wishbone looking thingy in Hebrew, that's kind of a semicolon. So we can go up to the semicolon. Kimat tuvo uma yafio. So how goodly and how beautiful, or I should say, how much is the goodness and how much is the beauty of the dagan is the new grain, or the grain of the young men. Mitirosh is the new wine, the new grapes, or the new wine. Inovev, that have been picked by the virgins. Okay. All right. Let's get again a little bit of interpretation here. So, how goodly and how lovely the young men like new grain, and the virgins like lush new wine. That's how Robert Alter translates it. Let's get a little commentary. The Hebrew uses the verb yinovev. That means something like to bring forth produce, right? Which is why I translated it as tirosh yinovev betulot, the new wine that's picked, that's made by the young women, by the virgins. Again, all very poetic. We can sit here and pick it apart for another hour, but we're not going to do that. Okay, let's go to chapter 10. Oops. And again, let's just sum up chapter 9 where we read, so 14 through 17. And we'll look at it in the English again, just to kind of summarize. I'll use Robert Alter's translation. Okay. Rather than the NIV. So, and Yahweh shall be seen over them, over Israel, of course, and his arrow come out like lightning. And the master, the Lord, shall blast the ram's horn and go forth in the storms of the south. Right, again, blasting the ram's horn is the call to go out to battle. The Lord of armies shall defend them, and the sling stone shall consume and conquer, and drink blood like wine, and be filled like ritual basins, like the corners of an altar. And Yahweh shall rescue them on that day. His people like sheep, for they are the crown jewels and gleam on the soil. How goodly and how lovely the young men like new grain, and the virgins like lush new wine. Right? So these are in other words, when he rescues Israel, the young men will be as strong and good looking as new grain, and the young women like new wine. Right? It's very beautiful imagery again of Yahweh coming to the rescue of Israel. Let's again put it in context. So chapter 9 starts as a warning against Damascus, or specifically really against Tyre, right? A Phoenician city in current-day Lebanon, north of Israel, and Sidon. Where'd Sidon go? Right? And then the Philistine cities of the south, 4 of which are mentioned here, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gaza, and Ekron, are going to see all the destruction that's come upon the Phoenician cities of the north, and will fear, and eventually will be conquered by Yahweh. Okay. So greatly exalt Zion's daughter, shout for joy, Jerusalem's daughter, look, your king shall come to you. Victor and triumphant is he, a lowly man riding on an ass, on a donkey, the foal of a she-ass. Right? So again, this imagery of a king, a descendant of David, ostensibly leading the battle against the enemies of Israel at some point in the future. So we could say this is kind of a messianic prophecy. There are very few messianic prophecies actually in the Tanakh. The rabbis make a big deal out of a coming Messiah. Of course, the Christians make a big deal out of a coming Messiah. But the fact of the matter is, the Tanakh does not really focus a lot on a coming Messiah. It really focuses more on Yahweh coming back and ruling over Israel. Hold on, my cat wants to come in. Joshua, come, baby. Come right now. Come, sweetie boy. Come. 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 Come, my boy. Come. Come, baby. Come. Come right here. Go to your seat. Go to your chair. No? All right. And eventually, right, Yahweh will come out and fight for Israel. So that's what we have in Zechariah chapter 9. Okay. Let's go to Zechariah chapter 10. I think we're going to start next week, but I want to get now back into Leviticus. I think we're going to do this next week. So let me just make a note that we're starting in chapter 10 of Zechariah next week. Okay. Joshua, what are you doing, sweetie? Come, go to your chair, baby. Come on, go to your chair. Oh, my boy, go to your chair. There we go, baby. What, sweetie boy? You want to play right now? That's what you want to do. Okay, so that's it for Zechariah. Any questions? Any comments? Before we go into Leviticus. So we're going to go into Leviticus. We're in verse 18, if I remember correctly. I won't take a break. I want to dig right into Leviticus. Let me close up Zechariah. So that's the review of Zechariah. The other thing we learned today was the Melech inscriptions, right? These inscriptions, these approximately 2,000 inscriptions that were not inscribed, but impressed upon clay vessels that have been found mostly in the southern kingdom of Judea and dated to the time of Hezekiah, very possibly or very probably aligned or relevant to Sancherib's attack on Judea, on the southern kingdom after 700. I can't remember the exact date, but in the late 600s BCE. And so that sums up those two things. Let's dig into Leviticus chapter 25. And let me bring it up here. Also the Robert Alter. Show, you got to behave yourself, sweetie boy. You want to go back out? What do you want to do, my boy? Can't go crazy in here. So we're in Leviticus chapter 25. Oh, that's not Leviticus. Oops. Let's try it again. Anyway, I can bring it up here in the meantime. Shosha, what are you doing, sweetheart? What are you doing? I'm going to let you outside. You're going a little bit crazy. I know what you want. You want food, don't you? Soon. Go, my boy. All right. Let's bring up Leviticus chapter 25. Where are we? Numbers. There we go. Leviticus chapter 25. Same thing. Robert Alter. Just give me a second just to set this all up. Page 1030. Make this a little bit larger. Boom, there we go. And here we are in the English. So we spoke about this again, just to get context. I'll read a bit in the English and then we'll switch over to the Hebrew. Let's read from the beginning. Yahweh said to Moses in Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather your crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to Yahweh. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Okay. Remember the Gezer calendar. We saw the sowing occurs in the winter. So once the rainy season starts, then you're not supposed to do anything that's going to allow the harvest to grow in the following dry season when the spring comes. However, we said that this is in no way, shape, or form proof that the year starts in the fall, in the 7th month, as the rabbis claim it does with their false holiday Rosh Hashanah on the first day of the 7th month, which the Torah, of course, calls Yom Teruah, the day of noise making, or the day of trumpets. Do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. So it's Shabbat, right? Shabbat. The 7th agricultural year is called a Shabbat in the Torah. Whenever the land yields, whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, yourself, your male and your female servants, right? Just like on the Shabbat. We rest so that our sons, our daughters, our male and female servants, our gerim, this is here actually, it's a different word. But if you remember in in Exodus chapter 20, it says, you keep the Shabbat in order that your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your animal, and the ger, the quote-unquote convert, shall rest as well. You rest because of that. And here, the land rests so that, again, all of these downtrodden, all of these unprivileged, underprivileged, right, classes in Israel, right, the slaves, the temporary workers, residents, the animals, so that they can eat, right? So we see that the Shabbat, the 7th year Shabbat, is really very analogous in many ways to the 7th day Shabbat. On the 7th day Shabbat, we rest so that the slaves, our children, our slaves, our animals can rest. In the 7th year, we let the land rest so that our slaves, animals, and so on can eat the produce of the land, meaning for free. Right? It's not mischari, it's not sold. Right? There's no commercial agriculture that goes on during the 7th year. That's the idea. Whatever the land produces may be eaten. So all the fields are open. Anyone can come in and take what they need is the idea. Right? The family itself that owns the land lives off that produce that goes on its own, and all of the underprivileged classes, slaves, temporary workers, temporary residents, animals, and so on, also may come in and eat of that produce for free, is the implication. The land rests. There's no money made off agricultural activity in the land on that year. Okay? It's very beautiful, and that's why it's called the Shabbat. It's very analogous to Shabbat in many ways. The year of the Jubilee. Just checking in. So count off 7 Sabbath years, right? 7 of those 7 years. 7 times 7 years. Again, here we have an analogy to the counting of the Omer. The 49 days that are counted between the bringing of the Omer and the that 7th Shabbat, right? So it's the same thing. Here we're counting off 7 times 7 years. We're counting 7 Shabbat years. When we count the 49 days between the bringing of the Omer offering on Sunday, okay, we count 7 Shabbats. And the day after that is Shavuot, is bringing the wheat harvest, the first fruits of the wheat harvest. So we see again all of this analogous, right? The Torah is using these cycles of 7 days, cycles of 7 years, 7 between the Omer offering and Shavuot, 7 cycles of 7 weeks, 7 Shabbats. I should be very specific so as not to give any credence to the rabbinical idea that it's not a Shabbat that we're talking about. And here we have 7 Shabbat years, right? So these cycles are repeated. They're referencing each other. So the 7 Shabbat years amount to a period of 49 years, just like the 7 Shabbats that we count between the Passover, between the Omer offering and Shavuot. right? 7 Shabbat weeks, 7 weeks that each week ending on the Shabbat. Then have the trumpet sounded everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month on the Day of Atonement. Sound the trumpet throughout your land. This is in the 49th year, which itself would have been a Shabbat year, because we know that every 7th year is a Shabbat year. So during that 7th Shabbat year, on the 10th day of the 7th month, then we have on Yom Kippurim, on the Day of Atonement, the trumpet is sounded throughout the land. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. We said this is the inscription on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. Remember, we always used to grew up in suburbs of New York City, and every so often we'd take a trip down to Philadelphia to look at the Liberty Bell. You go down and look at the Liberty Bell, you'll see this Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10, this phrase right here. Okay, proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants on the Liberty Bell, coming from right here. Shall be a jubilee for you, a yovel. Okay, yovel we said is an animal horn or a ram's horn. So it's basically like a year of blasting on the horn, because that's what happens here on the 10th day of the 7th month. Okay, there's going to be a blast on the trumpet, but it doesn't say the trumpet in Hebrew. Actually, let me go over to the Hebrew right now. I really wish the whole Hebrew would come up all at once, but okay, we can't always have what we want. Again, let's see, is it working now? No, it's just verse by verse. I'll give it one more try, but I don't think it's working to bring the whole chapter up in Hebrew. There it goes. Now it is working. Go figure. Okay, so chapter 9. So it doesn't, it's here they translate it in English as, okay, have the trumpet sounded everywhere, but that's not what it says. In Hebrew, it says, Havat the shofar turua, shall make a blast on the animal horn, or on the ram's horn, okay? So this is really kind of a bad translation, and that's why it's called the Jubilee year, because on the 10th day of the 7th month, there's a blast on the Jubilee. The Jubilee is just a transliteration, essentially, from the Hebrew Yovel, which we'll see right here. Okay. So let me start translating here. Okay. Oops. Yikes. Back here. Okay. Ve'avat shofar teruah b'chodesh hashvi'i. So you shall make a blast upon the ram's horn, be heard throughout the land, kind of paraphrasing here, on the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, Yom Kippurim, on the Day of Atonement, ta'viru shofar b'kol atzachem. Make sure that the blast on the ram's horn is heard throughout your land. And you shall, in doing so, you shall sanctify the 50th year. The 50th year is going to start the next spring, first day of the first month, the month of the Aviv, what they call today Nisan, the month in which Passover offering is brought, and the festival of unleavened bread called. So you shall sanctify this 50th year. And here is the phrase in Hebrew that appears on the Liberty Bell. Shall proclaim freedom throughout the land to all its inhabitants. Yovel. It's the Jubilee year. But what does the word Yovel mean? The Yovel also means, clicked on it, which is fine. It means a ram's horn. It's another word essentially for shofar. So it really means the year of the ram's horn. That's what the Jubilee year means. Okay, the 50th year is the year of the ram's horn. 7 Sabbath years, 7 Shabbat years, and then we reach the 40th year, which is the Shabbat year. On the 7th day, on the 10th day of the 7th month of that 49th year, there's a blast on the shofar. Shofar means ram's horn or animal horn. We'll just say ram's horn. And Yovel means animal horn. These are synonyms, essentially, of each other. Shofar and Yovel are synonyms. Yovel is the word in Hebrew. Jubilee, Yovel, Jubilee. It's the same word transliterated into English. Yovel transliterated into English is Jubilee. So the Jubilee year, and the word Jubilee really means the year of the ram's horn. because the ram's horn is what's blasted on the 10th day of the 7th month on the 49th year, on that 7th Shabbat year. And now we're going to get in another, essentially, a Shabbat year. Okay. Shaftem ish el achuzato. Okay. We'll go back to English because we studied this last week. So each of you is to return to your family property. Every Israelite has a piece of the land of Israel that is passed down as an inheritance. It's subdivided and subdivided and subdivided as the family, as the clan, as the tribe multiplies in number of people. But everyone in Israel receives a piece of the land of Israel, which can never be taken away from them. This is the exact opposite of what we have today in the modern state of Israel, where the government of Israel owns approximately 97, if I have the latest number correct, 97% of all the land. There's very little private property. There's something called tabu, which is an old Ottoman Turkish term for private property. I think about 3% of the land in Israel today is tabu, where you actually own it. If you quote unquote buy land in Israel, you're not really buying it. You're just leasing it long term from the government for, I think it's 99 years or something like that. The state of Israel was founded essentially by communists. The original founders of Israel were communists coming from Russia. Ben Gurion was originally from Russia. I'm sure from Russia. And these were communists. That's why you have a kibbutz. You've all heard of a kibbutz. A kibbutz means a commune. The original founders of the state of Israel established the country essentially as a communist country. And so, as in any good communist country, all of the common property or all of the resources of the land are owned by the state. And this is to this day. We see this to this day. Okay? All right. So each of you is to return to your family property, but in the Torah, there's no such thing as state ownership. There's ownership by clan, by tribe, by clan, by father's house, by family, and your own clan. So everyone on this Jubilee year gets their land back. There's no such thing, just as in the modern state of Israel, there's no such thing as anyone owning land at all, pretty much. In ancient Israel, there's no such thing as land being owned by rich landowners or by the state itself. Until the king comes along. That's another story. The land is in the hands of the people and it can never be taken away. In the 50th year, you get your land back. The inheritance that's given to you as for being an Israelite. The 50th year shall be a ram's horn year for you, a jubilee for you. Do not sow and do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the untended vines. It's the exact same language we saw above the Sabbath year. So the 49th year is a Sabbath year. It's the seventh cycle of 7. And then the 50th year is a second Sabbath year, 2 Sabbath years in a row. I mean, it's called the Jubilee year, but the rules are the same as the Sabbath year. For it is a ram's horn year and is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the field. So there are 2 years in a row in which you're not allowed to do any kind of commercial agriculture. The 49th year and then the 50th year. And the next year resets. In this year of Jubilee, everyone is to return, and I'm going to start calling it in the year of the ram's horn. Everyone is to return to their own property. And we're going to pick it up here in verse 14. Oh no, we did this last year, so I'm going to continue in the English, and then when we get down to 18, then we'll switch over to the Hebrew. So this is now an explanation of what happens in the Jubilee year. Remember we said in the Jubilee year, everyone gets their land inheritance back. Right? Can never be taken away from them. So now we get a little bit more of the details about that. If you sell land to any of your own people or buy land from them, do not take advantage of each other. What does that mean? Or what do we mean by that? What does Yahweh mean by that? You are to buy from your own people on the basis of the number of years since the Jubilee. And they have to sell you on the basis of the number of years left for harvesting crops. So essentially, as we spoke about last week, you can never buy the land. You can never buy land permanently from someone else because it reverts to you. If you're an Israelite, and actually the Gerim, it speaks about in the end of days, whichever tribe they're associated with, they also get a land inheritance. But in ancient times, if you're a native-born Israelite, then you can never lose your land. the most you could do is essentially lease it for up to 50 years, for up to 49 years, and then the 50th year it comes back to you. So what this is saying is, since you can't sell the land, all you could do is lease it, and depending on the number of years that are left until the Jubilee year, when you get your land back, that's what you should charge. So if you're in the 25th year or 24th year, there are 25 years left until the Jubilee year starts. So you should only charge the person the right amount of money for 25 years of crops. If there's 3 years left until the Jubilee year, then you'll charge the person for 3 years of crops. That's the idea. When the years, meaning the years until the Jubilee year, are many, you're to increase the price, and when the years are fewer, you're to decrease the price, because what is really being sold to you is the number of crops. Right? So don't take advantage. Don't jack up the price. If there's only 5 years left until the Jubilee year, don't sell them use of the land, or don't lease to them the land as if there's 30 years left. Okay? Do not take advantage of each other, but fear your God. I am Yahweh, your God. And we spoke about how this is part of the chapter 26, part of what's called the Holiness Code, where we see this a lot. I am Yahweh, your God. And now we're going to pick it up in 18. Okay? In the Hebrew. We have our Robert Alter here to give us some interpretation. So we get the idea. Any questions about this? It's really beautiful when you think about it. Yahweh wants to make sure that nobody in Israel becomes poor, right? A person without land, we know in the United States, it's so hard now to own a house. It's so hard now to own land with all the property taxes. And if you don't pay your property taxes, it can be taken away from you. It can be foreclosed. If you don't pay the interest and the high prices for houses, your house can be taken away from you. In ancient Israel, in the Torah, your land can never be taken away from you. It can be leased temporarily to someone else, but it goes back to you. There's no one who is an Israelite that is without a permanent piece of land in the land of Israel. Okay, we are now in verse 18. Wa'asitnem et hukotai, what mishpatai tishmaru. So you shall do my statutes and keep my judgments. The Rabbinites, the rabbinical Jews, like to make a big deal out of what's the difference between statutes, kotai, my statutes, and my judgments, mishpatai. But I don't think there's any, this is poetic. As we say, every Torah study, repetition is emphasis. So these are just essentially synonyms. Do my statutes and keep my judgments, right? So it would be like saying in English, keep all of my laws, and my regulations, and my statutes, and my rules, right? The repetition is emphasis, right? That's what's going on here. And do them. وَيَشْتَبْتِمْ وَيَشَفْتِمْ عَلْ هَآرِتْ لَبَتَخ. And if you keep all of these laws, and this is specifically in the context of these laws of the 7th, the Shabbat year, and the 50th, the ram's horn year, the quote-unquote Jubilee year, then you will dwell on the land securely. Okay? If you're kind to each other, if you make sure you're not taking advantage of each other, if you are allowing the land to rest every 7th year, and when we get to the end of Leviticus, we're going to get into a very poetic part of Leviticus, and we'll end Leviticus with that, the blessing and the curse. And one of the curses is, if you do not keep the Sabbath years, then you'll be exiled from the land. You'll be thrown into the lands of your enemies, and then the land will get its Shabbat years because you won't be there. It's beautiful. It's hauntingly beautiful. We'll get to it. Okay, let's see. Is there any interpretation? Nope. Cool. Okay. Verse 19. Again, let me check in and see if there are any questions or comments. Nope. Verse 19. With Nathma, Ha'aras, Piriyah, Hakham, the Sova. V'shaftem lebetach aleha. So again, if you're keeping these laws, if you're keeping the laws, again, specifically the context here is of the 7th Sabbath year and the 50th Jubilee or ram's horn year. So then the land shall give up its fruit, literally its fruit, but its produce, as Robert Alter is going to point out in a second. V'chatem l'sova, and you will eat to your satisfaction. Saveach. Okay, you will eat to your satisfaction. V'yashaftem levetach aleha, and you will dwell securely upon her, upon the land. So repeat of this. V'yashaftem ala aretz levetach, shtatem levetach aleha. There's a repetition. Okay, twice. She'll dwell securely on the land. Verse 20. V'chit tomru ma nochal b'shana hashvi'it. And if you shall say, what are we going to eat in the 7th year? Okay, talking about that Shabbat year, the Shabbat year, right? Hen lo nizra v'lo ne'esof, v'lo ne'esof et tvotenu. Behold, there was no seed planted in it. V'lo ne'esof, and ne'esof et tvotenu, and we did not gather in any of our produce. Right? How are we going to survive if we don't? If we just let the land lay fallow on that Shabbat year? Okay, here's Yahweh's answer. I will bring, or literally command, my blessing to you. Okay, I will bring down a blessing upon you, b'shana shishit, in the 6th year. And it will make enough produce for 3 years. Okay, what do we need for 3 years for? Let's pick this apart. Okay. So, this is speaking, although it says the 7th year, the context again is that 7th year, right? The year before the Jubilee year. Okay, so it's the 48th year. The 48th year ends. The 48th, I should say, the dry season of the 48th year, the agricultural season, which we said by way of review, is from the spring until the fall, essentially from the 15th of the first month, from Chag HaMatzot, to the 15th of the 7th month. That's the harvest season. First the barley, then the wheat, then the summer fruits, culminating in Sukkot, harvest festival, the festival of booths. Shosho, what do you want, sweetie? Do you want to come in? You want to come in? Come, baby. I'm going to give you food soon, I promise, okay? You get some good food, don't you worry. Come, my boy. Come. Come. Come, baby. What, sweetie boy? What, my boy? Come. 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 Come to your place. Can't go crazy, sweetie. Okay, if you don't sit quietly, you have to go back outside. Come. Come, my boy. Come. I know. You want food. Oh, my boy. Come. Come, sweetie. Soon you're going to get food. Okay? Okay. Soon you get food. Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, baby. All right. Okay. 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 Very soon, sweetie. Okay, when you go out, because you see too much energy, and I'm going to come give you food very soon. I know what you want. I know what you want. Soon. Okay? Oh, so that's all right. So what's going on? So the harvest season, it's the 48th year. The harvest season lasts from the 15th day of the first month of the 48th year until the 15th day of the 7th month of the 48th year. That's the dry season, the harvest season, the season starting in Passover, ending in Sukkot. The Sukkot holiday ends. It now becomes the rainy season. It's the end of the 48th year. There's no sowing. There's no sowing of seed for the 49th year. The 49th year is that 7th Shabbat year, that 7th year. So 49th year comes. It's time to harvest, starting on the 15th day of the first month through the 15th day of the 7th month. nothing has been planted. Everyone comes and just takes, the poor, the slaves, the migrant workers all come and take of whatever has grown, since nothing has been planted during the weekend. That's the 49th year. Okay? So now, in the 10th day of the 7th month of that 49th year, on Yom Kippurim, that 49th dry season, or the harvest season, is almost over. The Jubilee year is proclaimed. The blast, the ram's horn year is proclaimed. And again, there's no sowing on that, on the end of that 49th agricultural year. There's no sowing in preparation for the 50th year, which will start the following 15th of the first month, the following spring. Following spring comes, harvest season, nothing has been planted during the winter. Again, for the second year in a row, there is the same deal. The poor come in, the slaves come in, the animals come in, and the family who owns the land, they just eat from whatever grows on its own. So that's now 2 agricultural years in a row. Okay. What happens now? The agricultural season ends. So it's the 7th year of that, the 7th month of that 50th year, Sukkot. Now it's in preparation for now we have preparation for that 51st year. The 51st year is the beginning of the cycle once again. This time, let me just read this for 1 second. Just give me 1 second. Just parse this in my head. Right. So essentially what happens is, so now it's the 50th year. The 50th year ends, that Jubilee, that ram's horn year ends, and now you're allowed to plant in preparation for the 51st year, or really what's the beginning of the new cycle. Okay? So the way this should really be understood is verse 21. I'm going to translate it literally, and then I'll interpret it. Okay? So on that 6th year, we're really talking about the 48th year, the 6th year of that 7th 7-year cycle. So on that 48th year, okay, the 6th of the 7th cycle, okay, 6th year of the 7th year cycle of the 7th cycle of 7 years. That's the 48th year. So the land will make enough produce to last. It says literally for 3 years, but it really means until that 3rd year from that time, until the 51st year. And that's clarified here. So here it says on that 6th year, which is really the 48th year, then starting then, the land will make enough produce until the 3rd year after that, until the quote unquote 51st year, which is really the 1st year of the new Jubilee cycle. And you're allowed to plant on that 8th year. The 8th year is now the 50th year. If the 6th year is the 48th year, then the 8th year is the end of the Jubilee agricultural season. It's the wet season, or I'm going to say it's after the 15th of the 7th month of the Jubilee year, which is the 50th year. So you can now plant in preparation for the 51st year, which is really the 1st year. But here in this count, it's the 8th year. It's a bit confusing, but if we had paper, we can all work it out. It's very logical, actually. And you'll eat the old produce, meaning whatever the land is still, whatever is growing on its own in the land, until the 9th year, which is really the 51st year, which is really the 1st year of the new Jubilee cycle. Because you're allowed to plant in the wintertime after the Jubilee year ends. And then when that 51st year, or that 1st year of the new cycle starts, in the springtime, now you're going to have planted during that winter, and you can eat again until that time. Ad v'tuata tochlu yashan. So until the produce comes in that 51st year, which is the first year of the new Jubilee cycle, which is the 9th year of the seven-year cycle. Hope that all makes sense. I wish I had paper and pen in front of us. I'd show it to you exactly, but it's all talking about that now the first year of the new Jubilee cycle, or the 51st year after the previous Jubilee. Okay. So until the new produce comes, you shall eat the old produce. In other words, to make a long story short, what the Torah is saying here is that for those 2 years where the land is going to lay fallow, and until the 3rd year when the new produce is going to grow, there will be a blessing. Yahweh will command his blessing upon Israel, upon the land. Okay, hope that kind of makes sense. Let me check back in and see if there are any questions or any comments. Anybody have questions or comments? Anybody? All right, let's go on a little bit more. We're not going to get down to the end of the chapter, but let's go a bit more. Verse 23. Let's get a little Robert Alter on this. Okay. We'll start here. So you shall go back, each man to his holding, without the notion of inalienable property holdings, the whole system of permanent division of the land according to tribes, and then clans would have broken down. On the other hand, the arrangements for the Jubilee release entailed the most cumbersome complications as 16 into 17 concede, and once tribal territories had disappeared, as an historical fact in the Second Temple period, the rabbis devised a legal mechanism that in effect abrogated the Jubilee, so the rabbis screwed everything up as usual. Since he's selling you the number of yields, if, say, there remained only 3 years until the Jubilee, the buyer would enjoy only 3 harvests before the land would revert to its original owner, and so the seller could only demand a limited purchase price, in all likelihood 3/49 of its intrinsic value. We read about that. Okay, I've charged my blessing for you in the 6th year and will produce yield for 3 years. This miraculous intervention, good enough. This miraculous intervention in order to generate a harvest in the 6th year sufficient for 3 years suggests that the legislation for the sabbatical year was in a way utopian and could have been observed only imperfectly for compelling practical reasons. Okay, that's his interpretation. And right. Okay, so that's what we're up to. Let's go on. We're now verse 23. Again, if there are any questions, please type them in. So we're in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 23. Ares lo timocher b'tzmitut ki li haaretz. Let's stop right there. The land shall not be sold forever. Right? In the 50th year, in that Jubilee year, it returns to its original owners. Ki li haaretz, because the land is mine. Ki gerim utoshavim etem imadi. Because you are sojourners and temporary dwellers or temporary residents with me. In other words, wow, this you could write a whole book on this statement right here. So, wow, the whole idea of the whole idea of Ger already is not just a whole book. You could write a volume of books about it, but the idea of Israel being Gerim, right? So Israel, Ger means a sojourner or a temporary resident, a temporary dweller in a place. So the Israelites were dwellers in Egypt. We see this already. Just bring it up for a second. What is going on with this website? I don't understand what's going on with this website at all. Let's try it again, different way. I know they're having some problems with their website apparently. My God, what the heck? All right, I'll have to check them. Let's try this one more time. I don't understand what's going on with this website. All right. Nah. They've been having some troubles with their website lately. Hopefully it'll work it out. So let me see if one more time if I can bring it up. Nope, ain't happening. Try to trick it again. Just give me 1 second to try to trick it. Nope. All right. So I can't show you the text right there, but this whole idea of Israel, this whole idea of gerim, of sojourners, right? We are not supposed to oppress the ger, the sojourner, the one who comes from a foreign land to live among us, because we were foreigners in a foreign land. We were foreigners in Egypt. Okay? And that's exactly what's being alluded to here in verse 23. Yahweh says, I own the land, and therefore you cannot sell it forever. It's not yours to sell forever. It's mine. So you can only sell it until the Jubilee year, and then it goes back to the person that I gave it to, Yahweh gave it to, who owns it permanently. Because you are just sojourners and temporary residents along with me. So a lot to unpack there. Okay? In a sense, Yahweh is saying that he himself is a temporary resident. He's just a sojourner. Okay? You're traveling through this strange world. This world, I don't want to get too philosophical, but this world is as strange and odd to Yahweh as it is to us human beings. Right? He himself feels, maybe speculating a bit here, but this is my interpretation of this, right? Yahweh feels as alienated in this world as we do. Any good person is going to feel alienated in the world as it is, and that includes Yahweh himself. That's a whole, we could talk about that for an hour, and I don't want to get into it right now. But let's see, let's get a little interpretation. So as everywhere in biblical usage, two nouns, literally sojourner and settler, are hendidiadis, with the modern legal sense of resident alien. So we've spoken about this word before, hendidiadis. Let's look it up again. So hendidiadis, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Hendiadis is a figure of speech where a single complex idea is expressed using two words connected by conjunction, usually and, rather than a noun and its modifier, originating from the Greek phrase hendiaduin, 1 through 2. Enhances emphasis by splitting a concept into components. And there are a couple of good examples we'll see. Okay, try and do it instead of try to do it, and sound and fury. Examples, I don't know, grace and favor, meaning gracious favor. Cup and gold, meaning golden cup, ruined and broken. Okay. I think you get the idea. So what Robert Alter is trying to say is that ger and toshav, so ger is a sojourner, okay, a visitor from a foreign land who comes to live in a new place. And a toshav is a temporary resident. So it means basically a temporary resident who comes from a foreign land. Right? And that's hence Robert Alter's translation of a sojourning settlers. Right? Where were we? 23. For you are sojourning settlers with me. All right. Any other interpretation there? Okay, you get the idea. Verse 24, בכל ארץ אחוז אתכם גאולה תיתנו לארץ. Throughout all the land that you've inherited, that you possess, גאולה תיתנו לארץ, you allowed the land to be redeemed. You give redemption to the land. Meaning, again, you don't own the land, I own the land. We're all traveling through this land together. We're all temporary residents. Me included, says Yahweh, right? You're with me. We all feel like we're strangers in a strange land. Again, maybe there's a little bit of interpretation on my part, but I think there's a lot of evidence for it in other places in the Torah. We saw in Ezekiel chapter 9, I believe it is, that Yahweh gets so sick and tired of being among Israel, among the people of Israel, because they're constantly worshiping idols, that he eventually leaves and is taken off to the east by angels, by the cherubim. Look at that in Ezekiel, I believe it's chapter 9, thereabouts. And in all the land of your holdings, you shall allow a redemption for the land. So what does that mean? It's pretty clear. Okay, land can be redeemed at any time by its original owner, by a relative acting on behalf of the original owner, and the buyer is obliged to sell back the land to allow redemption. The Jubilee then is a kind of backup system. If neither the original owner nor his kin can come up with the price of redemption, the land will, in any case, revert to its original owner in the Jubilee. And that's going to be clarified in the upcoming verses. Okay? So let's see what's going on here. Maybe I don't know how far we're going to be able to get. Maybe next year I'll just do Torah straight. Shabbat Shalom, Hadassah Thomas 7. Okay, so verse 25. Ki yamuch achicha mochar me'achuzatto uva go'alo haqarov elao ga'al et mimkar achiu. So if your brother, your kin, your family member becomes becomes poor, yamuch becomes lowly in status or lowly in money, right? His bank account is low. And he sells off his inheritance. He doesn't want to, but he has no choice. He sells off that land that's his last possession, right? In a certain sense, that was given to him, and now he's got to sell off his land that was given to him when the land was divided up among the Israelites. Then show very soon, sweetie boy. I'm going to give you food, I promise. Okay. Then a redeemer who's a relative of his shall come and redeem that which his brother sold. So what is going on here? We all get a land inheritance. If we're Israelites, every Israelite gets a land inheritance. Okay. Someone gets a land inheritance, they run out of money, they have no choice but to sell off their land inheritance. We already know, and we're going to see it again, that even if he can't, or even if he has to sell off his land inheritance, he's still going to get it back in the Jubilee year. But what this is saying is that if a relative can come buy it back for him before the Jubilee year, then that relative, that family relative, should come back and should do that for his brother, for his kin. Okay? So that he can come back to his ancestral land. Verse 26, Ish, ilo yelon go'el, וחיסירה ידו ומסע כדי גאולתו. So here's a situation. What verse 26 is saying is, if someone does not have a close relative who can purchase back the land, and he gets back on his feet. Literally, it says he Isigiado, his hand is able to reach, is the almost literal translation, right? But we would say that's an idiom. In English, it would be translated as he gets back on his feet. Umatzak de giulato, and he finds enough money in order to redeem it, or in order for its redemption. So in other words, this is a second scenario. Okay, so no relative came and bought back his land for him, but now he gets back on his feet, has enough money to buy back his land. Verse 27, Wahishav et shne mim karo, Washiv et rodef leish asher machar lo, Washav lachuzato. So literally, he should calculate, he should work out the years that it had been sold, literally the years of its sale, but the years since when it had been sold, Ishiv et aodef laish asher machar lo, and he should return the excess, the excess money to the man to whom he had sold it. Washav lachuzato, and return to his native land, his land holding, his eternal land, his eternal land holding. So what's going on? Okay, let's say a piece of land is worth. We'll make it really simple. Let's say a piece of land is worth $1 million. That's how much. If I sold it to you, it'd be worth $1 million, or be worth $1 million for 50 years into the Jubilee year. Let's say it's the first year, and the next Jubilee year is not coming up for another 50 years. So it's $1 million. Okay, I run out of, or someone runs out of money, an Israelite runs out of money and sells his land to someone else for $1 million. Okay. So after 10 years, he hits the jackpot. Now he wants to buy his land back. Well, if $1 million is what is good for 50 years until the next Jubilee year, and after 10 years, he hits the jackpot, now has enough money to buy it back, then how much does he have to pay back to the person who bought it? Well, he's paying back for 40 years. The $1 million that he received was originally for 50 years until the next Jubilee year. The guy he sold it to used it for 10 years, and now the original owner wants to buy it back, so he's buying it back. So he needs to return 40 years to the person he sold it to. That's 4/5. 4/5 of $1 million is $800,000. So he would return $800,000. He would pay back $800,000 to the guy he sold it to, and he'd get his land back, meaning that the total he paid him was really for those 10 out of 50 years, which was $200,000, or 1/5 of the $1 million that it was sold originally for the 50 years. Okay, it's pretty clear. Let's get a little Robert Alter on that. There is no Robert Alter on that. But just to sum up again, we'll read this again. Land can be redeemed at any time, either by its original owner, by a relative acting on behalf of the original owner, and the buyer is obliged to sell back the land to allow redemption. The Jubilee then is a kind of backup system of neither the original owner nor his kin can come up with the price of redemption. The land will in any case revert to its original owner in the Jubilee. We're going to see that right now. ואם לא מצאה ידו, דהשיב לו. So if he, and it's the same phrase, השיג ידו means to reach out his hand, or to his hand reaches. It's very hard to translate except to say gets back on his feet. So if he doesn't get back on his feet, literally it says מצא ידו, found his hand. ואם לא מצא ידו, if he doesn't get back on his feet, דהשיב לו, if he doesn't get back on his feet enough to buy back his land, היה ממכרו ביד הקונה אותו, then the land that he sold shall remain in the hands of the buyer, okay, the one who bought it, עד שנת היובל, until the Jubilee year, until the ram's horn year. הוא יצא ביובל ושב לאחוזתו, and it shall go out, meaning the land. I guess it's referring to in the car. But the land this is the masculine, but the land shall go back in the Jubilee year, or shall leave the possession of the person who bought it in the Jubilee year and return to its eternal landholder. I'm paraphrasing here. That's not exactly grammatically what it's saying here. So basically the idea is this. Okay? A person runs out of money, becomes poor, becomes desolate, becomes destitute, I mean. He sells his land inheritance. He has no choice. He sells his land inheritance. If at any given point, so he sells his land inheritance. Let's work our way backwards. No, we won't. We'll go in the direction. At any given point, a relative can come along and buy it back for him and we'll buy it back at the price that it's worth, based on the number of years remaining until the Jubilee year, right? So the example we give is after 10 years, he sold it for $1 million. A relative comes along and says, listen, I'm going to buy your land back for you for $800,000. It's the guy we sold it to has used it for 10 years. So he gets $800,000 back out of the $1 million. And you just pay me back whenever you want. I'm going to buy it back for you. Okay. Or if he himself gets enough money, okay, gets back on his feet enough to buy it back on his own, then he pays back the one he sold it to. Again, he gives back the change, the excess, to the person who he sold it to based on how many years are left, or based on how many years the person that he sold it to has already used it. And if not, if neither of those cases, if neither the relative or himself cannot buy back the land, then in the Jubilee year, it goes back to him anyway. And I guess the next year he can sell it again. Okay. Boy. Whew. I think we're going to stop here. So we got a little bit further. We're inching further. ואיש כי ימכור בית מושב עיר חומה והייתה גאולתו עד תום שנת ממכרו, ימים תהיה גאולתו ואם לא יגאל. Okay. So now we're getting into a different set of laws, related but different. So let me make a mark. We're going to start here next week, in verse 29. So Leviticus 25:29. But we're going to stop here. It's enough. I'm getting tired. It's getting late. It's already 8:45 p.m. here, and I want to go make myself a little bit of food. So let's stop here. Any questions, any comments before we wrap it up? We've been going at it for 2.5 hours, a little bit more. Any questions, any comments before we wrap it up? Alrighty, well, if not, then we're going to wrap it up here. I'll just make a number of announcements, as I always do. So first of all, you may join our community at the following link. Okay, members have access to a number of special things, including access to a members-only WhatsApp group. Let's put it up here. And special lectures that we do for only members. I hate to put things behind paywalls, but it's all for a good cause. We are trying to raise money for a whole bunch of projects that we're working on, including setting up a new learning center, having regular meetings, which is building a community here in Israel, which we've already in the process of doing, and a whole bunch of other projects, which you can look at on our in any of the announcements we send out. It speaks about, or sometimes I send out where it speaks about those projects explicitly. But for too many years, I just had people, I'm sorry to say, freeloading. And we can't do that anymore. We need people to help support us. If they're really serious about being part of the community, then support us not just with their lips, but with their hearts as well, and with their means as well. So please support us by, at the very least, joining our community. We're asking, as I always say, only about half of what you pay for a typical cell phone service in the United, if you live in the United States. Also, if you tithe, if you give a regular tzedakah, charity, on a regular basis, or some people will call it tithing, especially in the United States, if you give part of your salary, then you can contact me by email, privately, and ask me how to do that. I'll also put up the link where you can donate. This is the link for donations. Okay, pretty easy. bit.ly/secure-whack-donate. If you live on disability, Hadassah, and it's hard, then don't do it. I don't want anyone to feel as if they're obligated to do anything they can't do. Okay? So each person according to what they can do. I would feel super guilty if someone sacrificed money that they really need for food or rent or something like that in order to help us out. Okay? That being said, it is a very small amount that we're asking for, but each person according to what their heart is telling them to do. But please, please, please don't not eat on a given day in order to help us out. I would not want that. Okay. Right. And then podcasts. I mentioned we started doing podcasts. We've done 2 already. In fact, I will put a link if I can find it. Just give me 1 second here. Oh, I shouldn't have done it that way, but it doesn't matter. Let me give a link to the podcasts stream. No, that's incorrect. Okay, playlists, podcasts. How do I do this? Can I do that? That works. Well, I'll just give a link to the latest one. And then you can take it from there. So share, copy. Not sure how you'll copy down this link. Yeah, forget it. That's going to be too complicated. You're going to have to copy down a whole bunch of letters and numbers. I'm not going to do that to you guys. Just go to either the Karaite Insights YouTube channel or the World Alliance of Qara'im YouTube channel, and you'll find it there. Okay. And that's all I got regarding that. You know, we are having at least weekly get-togethers for the community that we're building here in the Golan Heights in Israel. And yeah, things are coming along. As I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, there's a lot of interest, fascination with Karaism, with Chosanim B'Tanach, with Tanach-only Judaism. A lot of fascination, and I think tide is turning in Israel that more and more people are waking up to it. So big things are happening. Okay, so I'm going to end with that. Any final questions or comments that anybody has? If not, then rightio. Then let me get some music going. Sure, that can work. And we'll say goodbye for today. Continuous. We'll pick it up next time. So thank you everybody for joining us. This has been Hakham, Melech, Rahmiel ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. Thanking you for joining us, and we'll go out with music as we always do. And we will see you, B'sarat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh. We will see you again next week. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and Shavua Tov. A great Sabbath and a great week wherever you happen to be in the world, depending on where you happen to be in the world. And we will pick it up again next week. Thank you. Toda rabah. Shabbat shalom. V'shavua tov.
צנע, 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 תראה החיילים, חיילים במושבה, פם, 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 אללה, 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 תתחבא מבין חיילי סבא. צנע, צנע, תראה החיילים במושבה, אללה, תתחבא מבין חיילי סבא. צנע, צנע, במושבה, אללה, אללה, אללה תתקבלה, בי וחיילי סבא. תורנה חיילים במושבה, אללה, 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 אללה תתקבלה, בי וחיילי סבא. הערב ירד לגבעות הכחולות, ירח עלה לרחף על חולות, עוד רגע ושוב ידלק הכוכב, יאיר את שבילי החלב. כה יפים הלילות בין הגבעות הכחולות. הלילה תישא את הנוף באפור, העיר כוכבים הרבים מלספור, לכל איש ואיש יש כוכב בעולם, שלנו יפה מכולם. כה יפים הלילות בין הגבעות הכחולות. אהבתי לקצור בשדות רחבים, אהבתי לבצור אשכולות כוכבים, אבל מכל אלה אוהב הלילות לבוא לגבעות הכחולות. כה יפים הלילות בין הגבעות הכחולות. כה יפים הלילות
בין הגבעות הכחולות.